Japanese houses look nothing like Western homes. But as we walk through one day, each strange detail starts to reveal something deeper. And the first clue is right here, at the very bottom of the house. When I was a little, I used to crawl under and hide here. It was normal for me at the time. I wasn't thinking that much. But seeing it now again, I honestly feel it's a bit strange. There is enough space for a child to easily enter, and it's not sitting flat on the ground. It must look like it is floating, slightly above it. Because I always thought a house was supposed to be firmly fixed to the ground. Look at that. So this is pillar, and there is a stone, and between that, there is a tiny space. It looks, richly unstable, and I'm not really sure whether it's safe enough or not. So why would anyone build a house like this on purpose? The more I look at it, the more it started to feel like this space itself was the clue. Japan is a wet country. It rains a lot, and the summers are, hot and humid. Moisture gathers close to the ground, and if a wooden house sits too low and too tightly against it, the structure would decay more easily. So maybe the house first needed a little distance from the earth, a little height, just enough to let air move underneath the floor. And when you see it that way, this strange shape starts to make more sense for me. Because this building method is called ishibadate. Instead of being deeply fixed into the ground, the pillars rest on foundation stones. At first glance, it looks unusual. But in a place like Japan here, it was actually a very rational design. And humidity was not the only reason, I believe. The more I thought about it, the more it seemed that this structure also made sense in a country where earthquakes are common. Because if a building is, rigidly fixed to its foundation, the force of the ground is transmitted directly into the structure. But here, because the pillars rest on stones, there was some room for the slight movement at the base and for the wooden frame to flex as a whole. Well, of course, this is very different from modern, seismic engineering, so I don't call it as the safest by today's standards. But already, here, at the very base of the house, you can start to see the logic behind the traditional Japanese homes. They are not simply strange, they were being shaped by the need to live with Japan's natural environment. Another thing I noticed from the outside is how far the roof extends. The eaves of traditional Japanese houses are often deep. At first, that can seem like just a part of the brick. But the more I look at it, the more it started to feel like this too must have had a reason. Because in a country like Japan, rain is, never a small thing. It's frequent, sometimes heavy, and often driven sideways by wind. So if the roof ended too close to the wall, the rain would reach the house much more easily. But with eaves this deep, a large part of, it is stopped before it ever touches the walls or windows. And once you're noticing that, another role starts to become clear. In the summer, when the sun is high and harsh, these deep eaves also keep strong sunlight from coming directly inside. So this was not just a decorative feature, it was another way Japanese houses adjusted themselves to the natural conditions around them. And what is interesting for me is that they didn't do this by sealing everything off completely. Instead, just with a raised floor before, they seem to have responded by shaping the boundary itself. And then there's one more feature behind me on the outside that stands out: the storm shelters. Normally, they are tucked away to the side like now, so the house looks open. But when the weather turns rough, another wall-like layer suddenly appears on the outside. All right, so let's check how it works. So basically, the sliding doors hide inside here. So just like open it like this, and one more. I don't know how many sliding doors inside. All right, like this. It's well protected. Look a bit heavy, but it's not. I think even children can deal with it. Because Japanese houses tend to have, large windows as we saw, and openings, they are also more vulnerable to the outside element. That is why when the weather becomes severe, it's sunny day now, but they need to create another solid protective layer on the exterior. Instead of staying closed all the time, they are usually kept open and only shut when needed. What is interesting is that for me, with Ishibadate we saw, the house is protected from the moisture rising from down below, and with eaves and storm shelters, it's protected from wind and rain coming from the sides. So naturally, it makes me wonder whether something was also done to protect the house from the above. So let's take a look at Japanese roof. At first, honestly, I thought this is just a typical, Japanese house roof. But thinking about outside exterior features, I also believe there is a reason behind that we like Japanese houses using it. Japan gets a lot of rain and there are also typhoons. In that kind of environment, a roof needs to do more than simply cover the house. It needs the strength to withstand rain over a long period of time. Roof tiles are actually very hard and high resistant to water. They don't absorb much moisture and their surface is designed to let rain run off easily. So in a rainy country like Japan, they made a lot of sense. But that is not the only interesting thing about them. When you look at the roof, another thing becomes obvious: the intense sunlight. Japanese summers are extremely hot, as I told you. The roof is exposed to direct sunlight all day long. Roof tiles are thick, and because of the way they are layered, they tend to create a pocket of air underneath them. That helps prevent heat from transferring directly into the house and soften the summer heat. Imagine like this, sunlight on the roofs all the time. It's really hot. But that said, Japanese roofs are not always the same everywhere. In the regions with heavy snowfall, the shape of the roof changes dramatically. For example, the steep roofs in Shirakawa-go Gashozukuri houses were designed to handle large amounts of snow. So Japanese houses were never built according to one fixed answer. They change the shape depending on the natural condition of each region. And speaking of regions, this is something I still love about Japanese culture, even in my modern apartment in Tokyo. There are small ways to bring Japan's season and local traditions into your home. And Sakurako, today's sponsor, is one of them. Sakurako is a monthly Japanese snack box with 20 traditional seasonal sweets, tea, and an exclusive homeware item, supporting local makers across Japan. This month, Sakurako takes us to Hokkaido, known for its rich dairy and sweet summer melons. Inside are Hokkaido-inspired treats like strawberry cookies, milk soft candy, and yuba melon jelly, paired with Hokkaido azuki tea. What I like is that instead of just trying one snack, you can enjoy a whole set of regional flavors slowly with tea. I also like that it gives you a reason to slow down for a moment. Usually I just eat snacks quickly, but with tea and a small bowl like this, it feels more like taking a proper break. The booklet explains each snack, the cultural background, and origin information too. Check the link below and use my code JAPANWITHNOW for $5 off your first box. Thanks so much for Sakurako. Let's go back to the house. As we've seen so far, Japanese houses contain many ideas for enjoying nature. Humidity, rain, and wind and even earthquakes. But when you think about it, this is not something unique to Japan. Houses everywhere are shaped by the natural environment around them. In hot countries, they are built to deal with heat. In cold countries, they are built to deal with the cold. Your home probably also has features shaped by the environment where you live. In that sense, the idea of resisting nature is, in a way, universal, architecture. And if that is true, then it can't fully explain why Japanese houses look this different. But then as I kept looking through the houses, I found a space that didn't quite fit that project. That is the Engawa where I'm in at the moment. So imagine if a house existed only to block nature out, a space like this here would not really be necessary. And yet the Japanese houses intentionally create one. So here at first, I think you can see it almost feels like a little hard to define. It has a roof, and in some ways it feels like part of the house. But at the same time, it opens directly toward the garden. It's not fully inside and not fully outside either. Of course, you can walk along it like a corridor, but the moment you stop here, you start to feel like something else. A place to sit for a while, to look out at the garden, to feel the breeze move through the house, to notice the air and the season outside. The place I'm sitting at the moment looks really Engawa, but technically it's not. At least my parents say it's not. You often find it in the traditional Japanese houses, running between the room and the garden, almost like a place suspended between the two. And the more I look at it, the more it started to feel a little unusual. Because if a house existed only to shut nature out, a space like this would not really make much sense. It would have been simpler to build, thicker walls, close the boundary more firmly, and separate the inside from the outside as clearly as possible. But as I explained, the Japanese houses didn't do that. So maybe Japanese houses were never designed only to resist nature. Maybe they were also designed to let nature in carefully, gently, and only just enough to live along with it. And this idea was not limited to air and scenery. When the people bring nature into a home, what is one of the first things they try to bring in? Probably light. And in this house, one of the clearest places where that idea appears is the shoji. At the first glance, it's very simple. But the more I look at it, the stranger it starts to feel. Because if the goal were simply to bring daylight into the room, there are much easier ways to do that. You can just use, large sheet of glass and let the light come straight in. Then the shoji will not really be necessary. But that is not what a Japanese house does. Instead of letting light in directly, it softens it first. The light passes through paper, spread gently, and enter the room in a completely different form. So since we're here, let's check how much the difference it makes with and without shoji screen. If I see the outside, you can probably see the light on my face. So now let's close the shoji screen. Yes. Can you see the difference? Check my face. Probably a bit darker than before. What do you think? So that is what makes it feel so distinctive. The room becomes bright, but not growling. Outdoor light does not rush in at full strength. It arrives more quietly, more gently, and fills the space in a softer way. But the more I thought about that, the more unusual it seemed. Because by modern standards, a shoji is actually a very weak design. It's just a paper and stretched over a wooden frame. It tears easily, it does not break sound very well in winter if it's really cold. Even in my own house, some part of the shoji are already torn. So if comfort, insulation or durabilities are a priority, I have no idea why Japanese people still using and keeping this kind of shoji screen inside the house. We've been using it over I think more than 1000 years, which suggests they were trying to preserve something that mattered enough to live with the inconvenience. Maybe it was this soft right. Maybe it was way of living that didn't want to shut nature out completely. If I count the layers between the room I'm in now and the outside, there are actually quite a lot. Storm shelter, a screen door, glass windows, regular curtains, lace curtains, and shoji. So it probably 5 or 6 layers in total. And each of them adjusts light and air in a slightly different way. When I look at these curtains, a new question arose in my mind, and it's probably the same thing you wonder at the moment. This house also has curtains, and you can adjust the amount of light by closing them. This is the same function as shoji screens. This question is a bit difficult to answer, and even comparing the two didn't immediately yield a clear answer. However, as some time passed and evening approached, I noticed a change. Can you say it? The shadows of the garden trees cast through the shoji screens, and the changing expressions of the light as time passes. It provides a unique sense of peace that can't be achieved with fabric curtains. So from these features, Japanese homes were not simply trying to maximize comfort and strength in the most direct way possible, even if that meant accepting a little inconvenience. They still chose to, receive natural light in a gentler form. And when you look at the shoji, you can really start to feel that philosophy. When I first understand what shoji were doing, I was honestly impressed, because the idea of bringing nature into the home through the light was not something I really thought about before. But the more I sat with it, the more another thought started to appear, because in one scene, this shoji also seems to hold nature back. It lets in the light outside, but it also keeps the outside view at a distance. Without this shoji screen, we could see the garden much more clearly. If the Japanese homes really wanted to bring nature inside, why stop here with this? As I kept looking at the shoji in this house, I noticed something else. Look at that shoji. Part of the slides open. At first it just felt like a small detail, but the more I look at it, the more it started to feel intentional. Because the light behind the shoji, there is a garden. And once you notice that, the reasons start to become clearer. A normal shoji lets in soft light, but it also hides the outside view. But this one creates a way to keep the gentle light above while opening a space below to see the garden from inside the room. And the interesting is the bottom part is openable, because we Japanese used to, sit on the floor. For me, it suggests that Japanese homes were not trying to bring in light alone. They also wanted to bring the scenery itself into everyday life. It was also brought in through the materials themselves, and I can really feel it now. One of the clearest examples of that is where I stand now. Tatami. Tatami are such a familiar part of Japanese homes that it is easy to stop noticing how unusual they really are. Because when you think about it, this is flooring, but it's not wood, stone or tile, it's grass. The surface of tatami is made from a plant called igusa rush. So even while Japanese homes lifted everyday life above the damp ground, they also brought a natural material directly into the interior. And when you sit or lay down on tatami, you can really feel the difference. It does not feel hard and cold like wood, flooring or tile. It feels slightly soft, almost as if there is air inside it. And because people don't wear shoes on tatami, and often not even slippers, you end up touching it directly with your bare feet, your legs or your hands. So this is not just a material you walk on, it is a material your body stays in contact with. And the more I thought about that, the more interesting it started to feel. Because tatami was not only nature in appearance, higusa is also said to absorb and release moisture, which means that in humid place like Japan, it may have helped soften the indoor atmosphere as well. So tatami too were connected to Japan's natural environment, but the function alone still does not fully explain them for me. Because if comfort, like durability and efficiency, were the only priorities, there are plenty of materials that would make more sense. That is why the most houses' floors are wood. Think about tatami. Tatami stains easily, they wear down, they are weak against water, they need care, and yet they remain at the center of Japanese homes right now for a very long time, which suggests they were offering something people didn't want to lose. Maybe that was physical comfort, but maybe it was also something deeper. And while thinking about that, I noticed something. My apartment in Tokyo does not have tatami at all. It's much more, modern kind of space. And yet, even there, I still find myself wanting some kind of nature in the room. I keep plants. Like some people use wooden furniture or even artificial greenery just to make a space feel softer and calmer. I'm the same. You're probably the same as well. So maybe this is not only about old Japanese houses. Maybe people simply do not feel free at ease in spaces completely cut off from nature. And when you look at tatami that way, they start to feel less like an old-fashioned flooring material and more like an older answer to a very human need. In Japanese homes, people also didn't mainly live from the height of chairs. They sat on the floor, slept close to the floor, and lived from a low eye level like me now near the ground. Which means tatami were not simply something to step on. They were part of a way of living in direct contact with a natural material every single day. And when you put tatami together with the engawa and the shoji behind me, a larger pattern starts to appear. Japanese homes were not trying to create comfort by shutting nature out completely, as I explained. They were trying to create comfort while still leaving some presence of nature inside. So that is why features like the engawa, shoji, and tatami, things that may seem unnecessary if you think only in terms of convenience, became such defining part of the Japanese home. Japanese homes were built to resist the forces of nature and at the same time to bring nature in. But the more I look at the Japanese houses, the more I feel that even that doesn't explain everything. One example is this entrance. In Japanese homes, there is almost always an entrance like this. Of course, as we've seen, traditional Japanese houses were built with, raised floors to protect against humidity. So there is a practical reason why the floor sits higher. And yet, if you think only in terms of convenience, this step can feel a little strange. For my grandparents, for example, it was never an easy thing to deal with. And still, Japanese homes kept this form. So if that is true, then maybe this step carried a meaning beyond simple structure of function. When I was little, when I come from home outside, open the door, and step into the entrance, there is already a feeling of I'm home. But when I really pay attention, I realize that the moment I feel most relieved is not actually when I open the door. It is the moment when I take off my shoes and step up from here. That is when it finally feels like I have truly entered the house. And when you think about it, that is a little strange. If coming home were only about arriving, then stepping into the entrance should be, enough. But in reality, it is only after taking off your shoes and stepping up that your mind really settles. You don't just continue straight from outside. Something pulls here. Your movement changes and your state of mind changes with it. And thinking about when I studied abroad in the UK, I lived in homes where you enter and simply kept your shoes on inside. And of course there was still a feeling of being home when I opened the door, but it didn't feel quite the same as in a Japanese house, at least for me, where something seems to switch completely at this point. So when I think about it that way, this step at the entrance feels like more than just an inconvenient feature. It seems to play an important role as a place where the mind shifts from outside to inside. And this starts to feel even more meaningful when you think about Japanese culture. In Japan, being outside often means constantly being aware of the people around you. As the phrase honne to tatemae suggests, people often live by balancing their true feelings with the way they present themselves in public. And maybe that is exactly why this shift from outside to inside matters so much here in Japan. Not just moving from one place to another, but changing your state of mind as well. Honestly, I never consciously thought about it before, but now, looking back, it seems to me that this small step may have quietly functioned as a device that shifted my mind from on to off here. So that is why the Japanese entrance always has a step, and that makes huge difference from yours. Once you begin looking at the Japanese home through this idea of spaces that shift our mind, even the things even you use every day start to look a little different. One of the curious examples is the bath behind me. Honestly, I've never thought that deeply about it before when I was young. But if we see the Japanese bath carefully, we can notice there are, so many things you may not have in your bath. It's well known that the Japanese bathrooms have the bathtubs, of course, and this panels allows you to adjust the temperature of the water inside the tub. But is this feature really necessary? If you were to ask, what is the bathroom for? Almost everyone would answer, it's a place to wash off dirt from your body. But the more I reflect on it, the more Japanese bathing starts to feel like something slightly different from, simply washing the body. In Japan, like soaking in the tub here after washing yourself carries a meaning of its own. I usually take a bath about 90 minutes before going to sleep. And the moment I sink into the tub, it finally feels, as if the day is over. That is why Japanese baths are not just tubs. They often come with ways to reheat the water and all kind of function designed around the bath itself by this panel. But in reality, you spend the whole day outside basically, and staying a lot, come home, take off your shoes, step up through the entrance, and finally lower yourself into the tub. Through the whole sequence, both body and mind gradually begin to loosen. So for me, maybe the Japanese bath was never just a place to wash away dirt. Maybe it was also a place to bring the tension of the day to an end. And what I find fascinating is that, even something as ordinary as a bath can carry such a different role depending on the culture. Alright, so by this point, it starts to feel as if Japanese homes contain, all kind of devices for settling the mind. And when I look through the house from that perspective, there's one more place that is difficult to explain through function alone. That place is the Tokonoma. This slightly recessed space in the corner of a Japanese room, when you really look at it, it feels quite mysterious. It's not a place to sit, it's not a place to store many things. If you think only in terms of efficiency, it seems like a space you could live without. In fact, in a country like Japan, where land is limited and homes are often small, a space like this almost feels, contradictory. And yet the fact that it exists makes me feel that it must have carried some larger meaning. It has a slight elevation and your eyes are naturally drawn toward it. Inside it, there may be only a few carefully chosen things like a hanging scroll or flowers, while a quiet emptiness is intentionally left around them. And the houses in Japan are famous as being small. It really doesn't make sense. We should use these kind of spaces efficiently, but somehow we just put small things like this and like this. The emptiness itself seems to shape the air of the room. And to me, this space seems to express a distinctly Japanese sense of the value of space, stillness, and intentional emptiness. Not filling a space completely, but deliberately leaving part of it open. Not finding value only in the number of things, but in the silence and margin that surround them. That may be why the flowers, the hanging scroll, and even the quiet emptiness around them can feel so powerful. And when you look at it that way, that Tokonoma may not be just a decorative space. It may be less a place for putting something and more a place for feeling something. Perhaps it was the final destination of what Japanese homes were trying to, become. A kind of emotional space, a margin left for the mind. When you look at all of this together, I don't think Japanese homes, look different from others, like simply because of design or culture alone. I think Japanese homes are different because they were not built merely as boxes to block nature out, but as places where people could live with nature and find calm within it. So, what does your ideal home look like? Let me know in the comment below. If you are interested in a Japanese house, you will definitely also like this video, so please watch it later. Alright, so thanks so much for watching and see you in the next video.